Think modern medicine invented the travel first aid kit? 5,300 years ago, a Neolithic hunter named Ötzi was trekking through the Alps carrying a custom medical stash. When scientists discovered his frozen, mummified body in 1991, they found 2 mysterious lumps of birch polypore fungus strung onto leather cords. This was not a snack. This specific mushroom contains toxic oils that act as a brutal laxative and killer antibiotic. Ötzi's autopsy revealed his gut was completely teeming with painful whipworm parasites. He was literally treating his own stomach bugs on the go with prehistoric pharmacology. Every single time you eat a delicious slice of cheese, you are celebrating a 10,000-year-old accident. Before plastic containers existed, ancient nomadic travelers stored fresh milk inside pouches made from the dried stomachs of young animals. On one 40°C, 104°F desert journey, a traveler opened his pouch expecting a cool drink. Instead, a watery liquid splashed out, leaving behind strange, solid white chunks. The natural enzymes in the stomach lining, called rennet, had completely curdled the milk. Instead of being completely horrified by this warm, clumpy rot, this absolute lunatic decided to eat it. He loved it, and cheese was born. Turns out, humanity's favorite snack started as a survival dare. Before modern labs existed, doctors diagnosed your illnesses by literally drinking your fluids. Welcome to the era of uroscopy, where medieval and 17th century physicians were affectionately known as piss prophets. If a doctor wanted to know if you had diabetes, they would pour your urine into a flask, swirl it around, and take a direct, unfiltered sip. In 1674, British physician Thomas Willis famously documented that the urine of diabetics tasted wonderfully sweet, like honey or sugar. This is literally how diabetes mellitus got its name. Mellitus is the Latin word for honey-sweetened. If it tasted completely watery and tasteless, you had diabetes insipidus instead. Be glad your modern doctor just asks for a blood draw. Talk about a terrible day for a taste test. In 1971, D.B. Cooper pulled off the ultimate skyjacking and vanished into legend. Just 5 months later, a 29-year-old Vietnam vet named Richard McCoy decided he wanted in on the action. He boarded a Boeing 727, threatened the crew with a fake grenade, and demanded $500,000, nearly $4 million today. He forced the pilot to fly low, strapped on a parachute, and leaped into the pitch-black Utah night. It was a flawless copycat execution. Except McCoy made one catastrophic mistake. He couldn't stop bragging. He had literally detailed the exact plan to a buddy days prior. Within 48 hours, the FBI raided his house, recovered the cash, and cuffed him. Imagine sharing an island with dragons. 50,000 years ago in Indonesia, a real-life hobbit species called Homo floresiensis did exactly that. Discovered in a cave, these tiny humans stood just 1 meter, 3.3 feet, tall and weighed around 30 kilograms, 66 pounds. They were literal miniature humans, but they weren't alone. They had to survive alongside massive 3-meter, 10-foot Komodo dragons and giant carnivorous storks. Think your neighborhood is rough? Try dodging a venomous lizard twice your size while hunting pygmy elephants. They eventually went extinct, but their legendary fight for survival is entirely true. Next time you think you're having a bad day, just remember, at least you don't have to outrun a dragon before breakfast. Think the Colosseum was just for gladiators and lions. Ancient Roman emperors literally turned it into an artificial ocean. In 80 AD, Emperor Titus flooded the entire stadium to recreate a massive historical sea battle. Engineers diverted a branch of the Aqua Claudia aqueduct, filling the central 80-meter, 260-foot arena with about 1.5 meters, 5 feet of water. They even brought in horses trained to swim and shallow draft war boats packed with prisoners to fight to the death. But the naval fun didn't last. Domitian later built the Hypogeum, the underground maze of tunnels, completely blocking the drainage and ending the sea battles forever.
Next time your pool party is a bust, remember, Rome built a whole navy in theirs.
Ever noticed those weird stone blocks on old city sidewalks? You are looking at a 200-year-old time machine. Before cars, climbing into horse-drawn carriages was a massive logistical nightmare, especially for ladies wearing giant, heavy skirts. The solution? Carriage steps, also known as mounting blocks. These stone mini staircases stood roughly 60 to 90 centimeters, 2 to 3 feet, high. They were the ultimate street-side wealth flex of the 19th century, placed right outside the mansions of the ultra-rich. Even ancient Romans built them along public highways because they lacked stirrups. They are everywhere, surviving right under our noses. Next time you see one, don't trip over it, unless you are genuinely trying to board your modern sedan like a medieval knight. In 1887, a group of anti-feminist men in Argonia, Kansas, decided to pull a hilarious political prank. Women had just won the right to vote in local elections, so these guys surreptitiously put 27-year-old Susanna Salter on the mayoral ballot. They assumed the literal concept of a female mayor was so humiliatingly absurd that she would get crushed, exposing the entire women's suffrage movement as an absolute joke. Salter didn't even know she was running. She was literally at home hanging up her laundry when local voters knocked on her door to break the news. Instead of backing down, she calmly agreed to serve if elected. The town's women and local Republicans completely hijacked the prank, voting for her en masse. Salter won by a massive 2/3 landslide, becoming the first female mayor in American history. She served her full 1-year term flawlessly, and her official salary for the entire year was a whopping $1. Talk about a prank that aged like milk. Ever wonder why there is a weird button on top of your baseball cap? Officially called a squatchy, it has a surprisingly functional history. When the first modern caps were engineered over 160 years ago, 6 fabric panels were sewn together, meeting at a single point. To hide the messy intersection of heavy stitching and secure the crown, manufacturers slammed a metal rivet right over the junction. Today, advanced sewing means it is totally useless structural dead weight kept solely for tradition. But catchers and headphone users absolutely hate it. If anything slams into that metal prong, it drives it directly into your skull. Next time you wear a cap, pray nothing falls from above. Think cheerleading is just pom-poms and short skirts? Think again. When the sport was born in the late 19th century, it was considered the absolute peak of masculinity, ranking right alongside playing quarterback. On November 2nd, 1898, a medical student named Johnny Campbell jumped a fence at a University of Minnesota football game, grabbed a megaphone, and led the world's first organized cheer. For decades, it was an exclusively male club meant to build leadership and rugged grit. The cheerleader-to-politician pipeline was so incredibly strong that 4 future U.S. presidents, Franklin Roosevelt, Dwight Eisenhower, Ronald Reagan, and George W. Bush, were all official collegiate cheerleaders. So guys, pick up the pom-poms if you want to rule the world.
If you were a Roman sailor 2,000 years ago, stuck in the middle of the ocean with zero drinking water, you wouldn't panic.
You would just grab a basic bath sponge. Long before modern filtration, ancient mariners engineered a genius survival hack to desalinate seawater. They would boil ocean water in large bronze cauldrons over an open fire on deck. As the water boiled, they hung massive sea sponges directly over the rising steam. Because salt does not evaporate, the heavy sodium stayed in the pot, while the pure freshwater vapor rose and trapped itself inside the sponge's pores. Once soaked, sailors simply wrung out the sponge for a fresh, safe drink. The Romans literally squeezed their survival out of a wet sea creature. Talk about a true sponge bath. Think carrying an umbrella makes you look sensible? In 1750s London, it made you a public target. When philanthropist Jonas Hanway started walking the rainy streets with a modern umbrella, people were utterly outraged. Brits viewed the contraption as a sign of weak character, calling him effeminate and way too French. But the real fury came from horse-drawn coach drivers. Rainy days were peak business for them, and umbrellas threatened their livelihood. Cabbies pelted Hanway with garbage, and one driver even tried to run him over with his carriage. Hanway literally fought back, beating the driver with his umbrella. He endured 30 years of public abuse just to stay dry. So, next time you open a brolly, remember the street wars fought for your comfort. Try not to whack any taxi drivers on your commute today.
If you think you're having a bad day, just remember what happened to Honduras in 1998. To withstand terrifying Category 5 storms, engineers spent 2 years building the state-of-the-art New Choluteca Bridge, a massive 484-meter, 1,588-foot engineering marvel, designed by top Japanese architects to endure anything nature could throw at it. Just months after it opened, Hurricane Mitch struck, dumping a staggering 75 inches, 1,900 millimeters of rain. The storm completely devastated the region, destroying almost every other bridge in sight. When the skies cleared, engineers rushed to inspect it. Against all odds, the 1,588-foot structure stood completely undamaged. But there was one unbelievable problem. The sheer power of the flooding had literally carved a brand new path for the river. The Choluteca River now flowed off to the side, leaving a world-class bridge standing over dry dirt. A bridge to nowhere.
In 1849, a brilliant but broke American inventor named Walter Hunt sat at his desk, frantically twisting a 20-centimeter, 8-inch piece of brass wire. He wasn't trying to change the world. He was just stressed out over a tiny $15 debt he owed to a local draftsman. In just 3 hours, he engineered a genius coiled design with a protective clasp, the modern safety pin. Eager to clear his name, Hunt patented the idea and immediately sold the rights for a measly $400 to pay off his friend. He walked away debt-free and happy. Bad move. The company that bought his cheap piece of twisted wire went on to make millions of dollars in pure profit off his design. Talk about a very expensive way to pay back a friend. Those useless little holes on your fancy dress shoes actually saved lives. Today we call them wingtips or brogues, and they are purely decorative. But in the 16th century, they were the literal crocs of the Scottish and Irish bogs. Poor farmers punched raw holes straight through untanned hide, so swamp water could drain right out instead of rotting their feet. For 2 centuries, no respectable Englishman would dare wear these trashy peasant shoes. That is, until the ultimate royal trendsetter, King Edward VIII, began wearing them to play golf and attend dinners. Suddenly, literal swamp drainage tech became the peak of high fashion.
Remember that the next time you try to look sophisticated.
Think globalization is a modern invention? Think again. In 1982, off the coast of Turkey, a sponge diver discovered a 3,300-year-old shipwreck sitting 44 to 61 meters, 144 to 200 feet deep. Known as the Uluburun, this 15-meter, 49-foot trading vessel carried over 20 tons of high-end international luxury cargo. We are talking about copper from Cyprus, tin from Central Asia, glass from Canaan, and pottery from Greece. The divers even found a solid gold scarab belonging to the Egyptian queen Nefertiti. This single Bronze Age ship connected at least 7 different ancient cultures, proving the world was hyper-connected long before the Silk Road. Ancient rulers clearly loved international shopping as much as we do. Honestly, I am just relieved Amazon Prime did not exist back then, or the pharaohs would have absolutely bankrupted Egypt with overnight shipping fees. Think getting grounded is rough? In 1717, a witty 22-year-old named François-Marie Arouet took a roast way too far. He wrote a savage satirical verse accusing the ruler of France, Regent Philippe II, of an incestuous affair with his own daughter. The regent was so furious that he threw the young writer straight into the notorious Bastille prison. But instead of crying over his 11-month sentence inside a dark cell, the writer pulled the ultimate historical pivot. He used the time to write his first smash hit play, Oedipe, and officially rebranded himself with a slick new pen name, Voltaire. He turned a prison sentence into a legendary career launchpad. One talk about a glow-up. Next time you are stuck in timeout, try inventing a new identity instead of scrolling. How Voltaire made a fortune rigging the lottery. In 1671, an Irish rogue named Colonel Thomas Blood pulled off the most audacious heist in British history. He stole the crown jewels. Disguised as a parson, Blood befriended the elderly keeper of the jewel house, Talbot Edwards. Once inside, Blood's crew clubbed Edwards, flattened the St. Edward's crown with a mallet to hide it, and stuffed the sovereign's scepter down a pair of breeches. They were caught red-handed fleeing the Tower of London. Instead of facing a brutal execution, Blood demanded to speak only with King Charles II. The king was so thoroughly amused by Blood's sheer audacity that he didn't just pardon him, he gave him an annual pension of £500 in Irish land. Crime doesn't pay, unless you're funny enough to charm the king. In May 1718, the terrifying pirate Blackbeard blockaded the entire port of Charlestown, South Carolina, with his notorious 40-gun floating death machine, the Queen Anne's Revenge. He held the city hostage, plundered ships, and took high-profile citizens prisoner. But he didn't demand gold, silver, or chestfuls of stolen jewels. Instead, his crew was suffering from a brutal outbreak of diseases, heavily suspected to be syphilis. Blackbeard demanded a single chest of medicine worth around £400. If the governor refused, he threatened to slaughter every hostage and burn the city to ashes. The terrified city complied, and Blackbeard released them completely naked. Think your cheap plastic ballpoint pen is a modern tech miracle? It actually started out as an aggressive industrial tool for carving leather. In 1888, an American tanner named John Loud grew sick of fountain pens ruining his cowhides. So he patented a heavy metal barrel with a rolling steel ball to mark leather. On paper, it was a total disaster, ripping pages to shreds. It took 50 years for a Hungarian journalist named Laszlo Biro to shrink the ball and use quick-drying newspaper ink. The ultimate upgrade? The British Royal Air Force adopted it because standard pens leaked at high altitudes over 3,000 meters, 10,000 feet. So your pen is literally battle-tested. Try to remember that next time you use it to doodle a sad stick figure. Your vibrating, anxious little Chihuahua was once a sacred guide through the underworld. Thousands of years ago, their ancient ancestor, the Tequichi, was highly revered by the Toltecs and Aztecs. Weighing around 4 to 9 kilograms, 10 to 20 pounds, these little dogs were believed to possess mystical powers, including seeing the future. More importantly, they were cosmic psychopomps. When an Aztec noble died, a Tequichi was sacrificed and buried alongside them. Its sole job was to guide the human soul through the terrifying 9 levels of the underworld, Mictlan, even carrying them across a river of death. Wildest part? Early Spanish accounts claim these ancient dogs were completely mute and couldn't bark. So show some respect. Your purse accessory is a retired underworld god. In the 1890s, a simple invention triggered a massive moral panic: the bicycle. When Victorian women began riding, it wasn't just a hobby. It was a total rebellion. To pedal freely, women ditched their suffocating 15-kilogram, 33-pound corsets and multi-layered skirts for bloomers, baggy trousers cinched at the ankle. Society went completely feral. Critics claimed the garments violated public decency laws, and conservative mobs literally assaulted female riders, throwing bricks and garbage at them. Medical professionals even invented a fake disease called bicycle face, warning that the sheer strain of balancing would permanently disfigure a woman's face into a hideous, bug-eyed stare. Turns out the patriarchy was just terrified of women moving faster than them. Think escargot is a fancy French luxury? 10,000 years ago, it was the ultimate prehistoric survival food. In North Africa, ancient hunter-gatherers ate so many land snails, they left behind massive, mountain-like mounds of empty shells called escargotières. Snails were the perfect ancient fast food, packed with protein, completely defenseless, and requiring 0 dangerous hunting tools. Then the wealthy Romans saw the locals snacking and turned it into an elitist trend, even building special farms to fatten them up on wine and flour. Talk about a luxury markup with a serious trail of slime. Think your favorite chocolate chip cookie was just a lazy accident? You have been fed a total myth. For decades, law claimed Ruth Wakefield ran out of Baker's chocolate at her Toll House Inn and dumped in broken Nestlé chunks, blindly expecting them to melt. But here is the real story. Ruth was a brilliant chef with a degree in home economics. She didn't make clumsy mistakes. She later confirmed she spent months intentionally developing the recipe to give her guests something unique to pair with ice cream. She hacked the dessert industry on purpose, trading her genius idea for a lifetime supply of chocolate. So stop calling it a fluke. Respect the hustle. Think Elvis Presley or Chuck Berry invented rock and roll. You are dead wrong. The entire genre was birthed by a woman playing a distorted electric guitar in church. Meet Sister Rosetta Tharpe. In 1938, decades before the 1950s rock explosion, she dropped Rock Me, unleashing a heavy, aggressive guitar style that changed music forever. Little Richard literally credits her for discovering him, while Elvis and Johnny Cash studied her blazing finger-picking and stage presence like a textbook. She pioneered the use of heavy distortion on her Gibson SG, driving gospel crowds wild. In the early 1900s, humanity was so completely obsessed with the newly discovered element radium that we turned radiation into a high society fashion trend. Elites threw wild radium parties where the lights were blacked out so guests could show off glow-in-the-dark clothes, play with luminous toys, and literally chug radioactive cocktails called liquid sunshine. The craze hit the theater too, where Broadway dancers performed the iconic Radium dance in glowing outfits. While theater costumes used cheap phosphorescent paint because real radium cost an astronomical $84,000 per gram back then, rich citizens still willingly slathered real radioactive cream onto their faces for a healthy glow. Think the word taboo is just ancient English slang. You are completely wrong. It was actually brought to the West by British explorer Captain James Cook in 1777, after he sailed right into a cultural mind-blower in the Kingdom of Tonga. When Cook invited Tongan aristocrats to dinner aboard his ship, they absolutely refused to touch a single bite of food. Cook was utterly baffled until they explained they were tapu. In the Proto-Polynesian language, the word literally means sacred, set apart, or completely forbidden. From royal rules to handling a corpse, breaking a tapu meant triggering divine wrath or severe cosmic punishment. Cook loved the concept so much that he brought it home, and it effortlessly went viral across the globe. So next time your favorite topic is strictly off limits, thank an 18th century sailor for the vocabulary. Before Mesopotamia built its first cities, an advanced Stone Age civilization ruled Europe with a mind-blowing secret. Meet the Cucuteni Tripilia culture. 6,000 years ago, they built massive proto-cities housing up to 50,000 people. But they treated these mega-settlements as temporary camps. Every 70 years, the entire population deliberately torched their own homes, burning everything to the ground before moving away. Scientists proved this required over 100 trees worth of firewood per house just to get the fires hot enough. It wasn't war or an accident. It was a mass ritual reset. Deep beneath a pyramid mound in China sits the colossal, unopened tomb of the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. Discovered right alongside his famous terracotta army in 1974, archaeologists absolutely refuse to open the main burial chamber. Ancient texts warn of hair-trigger crossbow traps and literal flowing rivers of toxic liquid mercury mimicking the country's geography. And science actually backs it up. Soil samples show mercury levels up to 100 times higher than normal. Rushing in could unleash toxic clouds and instantly destroy 2,200-year-old artifacts. When Caesar Augustus invaded Egypt, he thought conquering Africa would be a breeze. He clearly didn't know Queen Amanirenas of Kush. In 25 BC, this absolute warrior queen led 30,000 warriors straight into Roman territory, smashing statues of Augustus. She literally hacked the bronze head off his statue, took it home, and buried it under the steps of her temple so everyone would stomp on his face daily. The furious Romans retaliated, and during the brutal fighting, Amanirenas was blinded in one eye. Did she quit? No. She healed up, went right back to the front lines, and forced Rome to sign a highly favorable peace treaty. Now that is how you watch your step. When you use the term lingua franca, you are actually quoting a dead language. The original lingua franca, or sabia, was an actual Romance-based pidgin language. It emerged around the 11th century to help Genoese and Venetian merchants bargain in Mediterranean ports. This hybrid language had no native speakers and no formal grammar rules. Yet it served as the master key for global trade, diplomacy, and even piracy for over 700 years. It connected millions of people before fading away in the 19th century. So yes, it is entirely dead. I am just glad it did not survive long enough to have its own Duolingo course, because trying to practice 12th century pirate slang every morning would absolutely ruin my streak. Ever wonder why Brits pour milk into their tea first? It wasn't a fancy ritual. It was pure panic. In the 18th century, fine Chinese porcelain was the ultimate status symbol. If you couldn't afford the real deal, your cheap, fragile, everyday cups would literally shatter under the intense thermal shock of boiling water at 100 degrees Celsius, 212 degrees Fahrenheit. To save their cheap kitchenware from exploding into tiny shards, people dashed cold milk into the cup first to act as a temperature buffer. What started as literal damage control accidentally evolved into an elite, high society etiquette rule. So, if someone judges your tea-making sequence, remind them it's just ancient tech support. Talk about a tea-rific coping mechanism. Look closely at the buttons on your jacket sleeve. They do not open anything. They do not close anything. They are completely useless. So why are they there? It all traces back to a legendary gross habit and the high-stakes world of military discipline. The most famous story points straight to Napoleon Bonaparte. During his brutal, freezing winter campaigns, his elite French soldiers developed a nasty habit of wiping their runny noses and sweat right onto their uniform sleeves. Disgusted by his unpresentable troops, Napoleon allegedly ordered heavy metal buttons to be sewn directly onto the cuffs. Another historical theory credits Frederick the Great of Prussia with the exact same tactic. Either way, it worked. The painful metal discouragement forced soldiers to use handkerchiefs, preserving the pristine look of the empire's uniforms. Over centuries, uniforms evolved into modern civilian suits, but the design stuck around purely out of habit. So the next time you get dressed up for a fancy event, remember that your high fashion is actually just an ancient, aggressive anti-mucus device. Try not to think about that during your next job interview. Ever wonder why British Royal Guards wear those massive, fuzzy hats? It is not a fashion statement. It is one of history's ultimate petty flexes. Back in 1815, at the Battle of Waterloo, the British Army went head-to-head with Napoleon's most elite shock troops, the Imperial Guard. The French wore towering bearskin caps to look terrifying. But the British utterly crushed them. To humiliate their defeated rivals and celebrate the win, the British literally stole their look. They adopted the 46-centimeter, 18-inch bearskin caps as war trophies. It boosted a 1.8-meter, 6-foot guard to a giant 2.3 meters, 7.5 feet tall. So every time you see a guard today, you are looking at a 200-year-old victory lap. Think saying Mayday during a plane crash has something to do with the month of May? Think again. It is actually just a bad English translation of a French panic. Back in 1923, an airport radio officer in London named Frederick Mockford was ordered to invent a universal distress word for pilots. Because most flights at the time were traveling between London and Paris, Mockford wanted something French-friendly. He took the phrase Mayday, which means come help me, and anglicized it phonetically. Boom, Mayday was born. Before this, pilots used SOS, but early radios made the letter S sound like total static. Mayday was punchy and unmistakable.
Think duct tape is just for quick home repairs? It was actually invented by a furious mother trying to save her sons in World War II.
In 1943, Vesta Stout worked at a munitions plant and spotted a deadly flaw. Ammo boxes were sealed with flimsy paper tape. Under enemy fire, the pull tabs tore right off, leaving soldiers trapped. When her bosses ignored her fix, she bypassed them and wrote directly to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. FDR ordered Johnson & Johnson to make it. Soldiers called the tough, waterproof cloth invention 100 mph tape because it fixed everything from boots to jeeps. Next time you patch a leak, thank Vesta. Think ancient Greek and Roman statues were always pure, elegant white marble? You are looking at a historic lie. For thousands of years, those iconic sculptures were actually blasted with bright, vivid paint. Artists coated them in lifelike skin tones, dramatic shadows, and dazzling patterns. But over centuries under the elements, the paint flaked off. When Renaissance thinkers dug them up, they mistook the naked marble for the intended look, birthing a global aesthetic of false minimalism. Worse yet, early museums literally scrubbed away surviving pigment traces to keep them white. We erased ancient art history because of a giant misunderstanding. So next time you view a marble bust, picture it in loud neon instead. It turns out the ancients had the exact same gaudy taste as your eccentric aunt. In 1995, a tiny Canadian mining company called Brits claimed they found the largest gold deposit in history, deep in the Indonesian jungle. Wall Street went completely feral, sending their stock value skyrocketing to an insane $6 billion. It was the ultimate gold rush. But the entire massive fortune was built on a cheap wedding ring and an ordinary nail file. The company's chief geologist, Michael de Guzman, was systematically faking the core samples. He literally used a file to shave tiny flecks of gold from his own jewelry, and later bought local gold dust, mixing it into the crushed rock samples. The massive lie completely imploded in 1997 when an independent audit found the gold wasn't even volcanic. It was rounded river gold. Overnight, the stock crashed straight to zero, and de Guzman mysteriously plunged from a helicopter. Turns out, all that glitters is just a very dedicated con artist. In 1962, con artist Tino De Angelis pulled off a massive financial heist using one basic rule of science. Oil floats on water. His company borrowed hundreds of millions from 51 banks using warehouse receipts for giant tanks of soybean oil as collateral. Wall Street and American Express inspectors regularly checked the facilities, but they were totally fooled. De Angelis filled the massive storage tanks with water and poured a thin layer of vegetable oil on top. Some tanks even used secret pipes to shuttle the same oil from tank to tank during audits. By 1963, his paper illusion claimed more salad oil than the entire US possessed. The House of Cards collapsed, wiping out $150 million, over $1.5 billion today. Turns out, grease isn't the only thing that's slippery. Ever wonder where the phrase "mad as a hatter" actually comes from? It is not just a quirky fairy tale, it is a dark industrial horror story. During the 18th and 19th centuries, workers in the felt hat industry spent their days crammed inside poorly ventilated rooms. To turn animal fur into smooth felt, they used hot solutions of mercuric nitrate. As they worked, they constantly inhaled toxic mercury vapor, which slowly built up inside their brains and wrecked their central nervous system. It triggered a severe neurological disorder called erethism. The symptoms? Hallucinations, extreme irritability, and violent body tremors that became known as the Hatter's Shakes. These workers weren't naturally eccentric or crazy. They were being actively poisoned by their own jobs until the United States finally banned the toxic chemical in 1941. So next time you put on a stylish hat, Just be glad the only thing it is killing is your hairstyle. In 1964, a handsome Miami Beach boy and championship surfer named Jack Murphy, better known as Murph the Surf, pulled off the jewel heist of the century. Along with his surfer buddies, he targeted the American Museum of Natural History in New York. The security was so utterly non-existent that the museum left its fourth-floor windows open 5 centimeters, 2 inches, for ventilation, and the display case alarms were completely broken. The thieves literally just climbed right in. They made off with 24 priceless gems, including the massive 563-carat Star of India sapphire. The haul was worth over $400,000 back then, which is over $4 million today. Elvis Presley was the undisputed king of rock and roll, but the man pulling his strings was a total ghost. For decades, the world knew his manager as Colonel Tom Parker from West Virginia. He controlled Elvis's entire life, famously taking a massive 50% cut of his earnings. But it was all a lie. The colonel wasn't a military colonel, he wasn't American, and his name wasn't even Tom Parker. He was actually Andreas van Kuijk, a Dutch stowaway who entered the US illegally. This single secret completely ruined Elvis's dream of performing for millions of global fans. Because the colonel lacked a US passport and feared instant deportation, he refused to let Elvis tour internationally. In 2003, a crew of Italian thieves pulled off the ultimate heist of the century by breaking into the impenetrable Antwerp Diamond Center. Led by Leonardo Notarbartolo, they expertly bypassed 10 extreme layers of high-tech security, including Doppler radar, infrared heat detectors, and magnetic fields. They successfully vanished into the night, with over $100 million in loose diamonds. It was a completely flawless execution, until they hit the highway. One paranoid accomplice suffered a massive panic attack and forced the getaway car to pull over so he could randomly dump their trash in the woods. That trash contained a half-eaten salami sandwich. Police easily extracted the thief's DNA from the bread, tracked them down, and busted the entire ring. Imagine beating Doppler radar just to get destroyed by a snack. Mary Delaney wasn't just a socialite. She was a botanical visionary. At age 70, she began creating paper mosaics, incredibly detailed, scientifically accurate floral collages made from tiny, hand-cut pieces of paper. Her skill was so immense that contemporary botanists praised her work for its precision. But her life was also defined by a brilliant social circle. She was a close personal friend of composer George Friedrich Handel. Imagine the scene. While Delaney meticulously cut her thousands of paper petals, she was often chatting with the musical genius behind the Messiah. Two artistic giants, pushing the boundaries of their crafts, sharing stories and coffee in 18th century London. If my best friend told me, so I wrote this thing, it might be a hit, and it turned out to be the Hallelujah chorus, I think I'd have to officially retire from trying to impress people. Think caviar is the ultimate symbol of elite wealth? In 12th century Russia, these salty black fish eggs were considered the ultimate peasant trash food. Cured in a simple salt brine, sturgeon roe was so incredibly cheap and abundant along the Volga River that poor families ate it as a basic meat substitute during religious fasts. Even in 19th century America, sturgeon were so overflowing in rivers that bars literally gave caviar away for free as a salty snack just to force customers to buy more beer. It only became a luxury when extreme overfishing completely wiped out the wild populations, turning a cheap bar snack into an elite status symbol. History books love to paint Medusa as a hideous, cold-blooded monster who turned men to stone just for kicks. But you have been completely lied to. According to the Roman poet Ovid, Medusa was originally a breathtakingly beautiful mortal priestess in Athena's temple. Her life was completely shattered when the sea god Poseidon assaulted her right on the sacred temple floor. Instead of punishing the literal god who committed the crime, a furious Athena blamed the victim. She cursed Medusa, transforming her stunning hair into a writhing nest of venomous vipers and turning her gaze fatal to protect her from ever being approached again. So she wasn't a villain. She was a survivor with terrible PR. London's oldest and most exclusive private club, White's, is so elitist it still bans women. But its hyper-exclusive legacy owes everything to a sweet tooth. In 1693, it opened as a hot chocolate shop. Back then, cocoa was an exotic, ultra-expensive status symbol for the ruling class. Soon, the sugar high drove the British aristocracy completely feral. It transformed into a notorious gambling den dubbed the bane of the English nobility. Bored elites bet massive fortunes on total absurdities. One legendary wager saw aristocrats bet £3,000, a life-changing fortune back then, on which of 2 raindrops would roll down a window first. Turns out, the global elite started as hyperactive gamblers high on cocoa. Think that creepy stone monster perched on the edge of a medieval cathedral is a gargoyle? You are completely wrong. Unless it is literally puking rainwater out of its mouth, it is actually just grotesque. The word gargoyle comes from the French word gargouille, meaning throat, which is exactly why we get the word gargle. They are nothing more than beautifully sculpted, gloriously dramatic rain gutters designed to shoot water away from church walls so the masonry doesn't rot. If a statue doesn't have a water spout running through its insides, it's a decorative grotesque. That includes the famous Darth Vader carving on the Washington National Cathedral. It's a grotesque, not a gargoyle. Think texting XO is just modern slang? You are actually repeating a 1,000-year-old legal ritual. Back in the Middle Ages, most people could not read or write. When signing an official contract, they would draw a simple X, which represented the sacred Christian cross. To prove they were not lying under oath, they would literally lean down and kiss the ink on the paper to seal the deal. Over centuries, that physical kiss morphed into the letter X itself, representing affection. The O came later, mimicking arms wrapping around someone in a massive hug. So every time you text your crush, you are flexing medieval contract law. Ever wonder why traveling the world requires a massive bag of bulky adapters? There are over 15 different outlet styles on Earth, and it is all because early engineers absolutely refused to cooperate. In the late 1800s, electricity was a brand new Wild West. Countries built localized grids independently, completely unconcerned with international travel. By the time the International Electrotechnical Commission finally tried to standardize a universal plug, billions of homes were already hardwired into their own systems. Rewiring everything would cost hundreds of billions of dollars today, so everyone just passed the bill down to you. So next time you fight an adapter, remember, it is an old corporate grudge living in your wall. At least your phone has a valid excuse for being totally disconnected from reality.
From Roman sea battles to lethal hat buttons, history really is stranger than fiction. It makes you wonder, what simple thing are we doing today that people 200 years from now will laugh at? If you learned something new today, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more incredible historical facts every single week. Tell me in the comments, Which fact surprised you the most? Thanks for watching, and keep looking at the world a little differently.